"Get out of first class before security removes you," Rebecca Sloan said, loud enough for every passenger in the cabin to hear. Darius Coleman stood beside seat 1A with a valid boarding pass in one hand and his identification in the other. He wore a navy sweater, dark trousers, and polished black shoes. Nothing about him was loud. Nothing about him asked for attention. Yet Rebecca looked at him as if his presence alone had disrupted the entire flight. Henry Whitman sat comfortably in 1A, adjusting the cuff of his gray suit, while a glass of sparkling water rested on the armrest beside him. He did not offer to move. He did not ask to see the ticket. He simply watched Rebecca defend the seat she had promised him. "This boarding pass says 1A, Darius said. His voice was calm, but it carried through the narrow aisle. Rebecca barely glanced at the document. "The system has already been corrected." Darius looked toward Olivia Brooks, the young flight attendant standing near the galley with a tablet held tightly against her chest. Olivia had scanned his pass less than 5 minutes earlier. The light had turned green. Seat 1A had appeared beside his name. Rebecca had seen it too. Then she had closed the screen. "Corrected by whom?" Darius asked. Rebecca folded her arms. "Sir, you are delaying departure." A few passengers shifted in their seats. A woman near row 2 lowered her magazine. A man across the aisle removed one earbud. The cabin had begun listening. Henry leaned back and gave Darius a thin smile. "There is probably a seat for you in the back." The words were spoken softly, but their meaning was not. Darius turned toward him. "There is a seat for me here." Rebecca stepped between them. "People like you always think confidence is the same as access." The cabin changed. The sentence moved through the air and settled heavily over every row. Olivia's eyes dropped to the tablet. Kyle Mercer, another flight attendant, stood near the curtain separating first class from the main cabin and watched without speaking. Captain Thomas Grant appeared at the cockpit entrance, already wearing the expression of a man more concerned about the schedule than the truth. "What is the issue?" he asked. Rebecca answered before Darius could. "This passenger refuses to accept his reassignment." Darius lifted the boarding pass. "I was not reassigned. My seat was given away." Thomas looked at Rebecca, then at Henry, then finally at Darius. He did not check the document. "Sir, we need cooperation." Darius glanced at the silver watch on his wrist. The time was 9:10 in the morning. He looked back at Rebecca. 30 minutes, he said. She frowned. 30 minutes until what? Darius lowered the boarding pass, but did not step away from the seat. "Until this entire cabin learns who changed the record, who approved it, and who decided my ticket mattered less than his suit." Rebecca gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Security will be here long before that." Darius met her eyes. "Then they will have excellent seats for what happens next." 29 minutes remained, but the chain of choices that had brought them to this moment began half an hour earlier, when Darius Coleman entered the airport without an assistant, a security detail, or the executive privileges attached to his name. He had chosen the public entrance at Meridian International Terminal in Atlanta because polished reports had stopped telling him the truth. Over the previous 3 months, his office had received 7 complaints from black passengers who said they had been questioned longer, moved from premium seats without explanation, or treated like threats after asking for what they had purchased. Each complaint had been closed with the same careful language: misunderstanding, seating adjustment, operational concern. Darius knew how institutions hid prejudice behind professional words. He wanted to see the system without the protection of his title. So he wore a simple navy sweater, dark trousers, and polished black shoes. No designer luggage. No company badge. No one walking beside him to announce that he was the founder of Coleman Capital, the man whose investment had prevented Meridian Airlines from collapsing 4 years earlier, and the largest voting shareholder in the company now carrying his boarding pass. He moved through security, bought a small black coffee, and arrived at the gate 12 minutes before boarding began. His reservation was under his full legal name. Seat 1A. Paid and confirmed. Olivia Brooks greeted him at the scanner with a polite smile. She was young, careful, and still knew enough to believe procedures mattered because they were written down. Darius placed his boarding pass beneath the reader. The light turned green. The screen displayed his name, priority status, and seat number. Olivia looked up. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Coleman." Rebecca Sloan appeared beside her before Darius could respond. Her eyes moved from his sweater to his shoes, then to the first-class marker printed across the top of the pass. "Let me see that," she said. Olivia handed her the tablet. Rebecca studied the record for 2 seconds, then closed it. "The system has been having problems all morning." Darius looked at the green light still glowing beneath the scanner. It did not appear to have a problem. Rebecca gave him a practiced smile that carried no warmth. "We will verify it on board." Behind them, Henry Whitman approached with Kyle Mercer carrying his garment bag. Rebecca's expression changed immediately. "Mr. Whitman, everything is ready. We arranged the front seat just as discussed." Darius heard the words. Henry gave Rebecca a satisfied nod and continued down the jet bridge without presenting a boarding pass. Olivia glanced at Darius's ticket again. "But 1A is assigned to him." Rebecca lowered her voice. "Do not complicate this." Darius said nothing. He had already learned more in 30 seconds than 3 internal reviews had revealed in 3 months. By the time he entered the cabin, Henry was seated in 1A, Rebecca was preparing an explanation, and the truth was already being treated as an inconvenience. 28 minutes remained. 27 minutes remained. Darius stood beside seat 1A while Rebecca positioned herself between him and Henry as though protecting the cabin from the wrong person. "Your seat has been adjusted," she said. "You can either accept the new assignment or leave the aircraft." Darius held out his boarding pass. "Show me the authorization for the change." Rebecca did not take it. Kyle Mercer stepped closer from the galley, wearing the casual smile of someone who expected the situation to end in his favor. "Sir, these things happen. There are plenty of open seats farther back." Darius looked past him toward the curtain separating first class from the main cabin. "I did not purchase an open seat farther back. I purchased 1A. Henry Whitman released a quiet sigh and checked his watch. "Some of us have meetings to attend." Darius turned toward him. "Then you understand why confirmed arrangements matter." Henry leaned into the cream leather seat, as if settling deeper could make ownership permanent. "Rebecca told me this seat was available." "It was not hers to offer," Darius said. Rebecca's professional smile vanished. "You are becoming confrontational." The accusation arrived without evidence, shaped entirely by the fact that Darius had refused to disappear. A woman seated across the aisle, Rachel Kim, lowered her phone and watched more closely. She had seen Darius present his pass. She had also seen Henry enter without being questioned. Captain Thomas Grant stepped fully out of the cockpit. "We need to close the door in 5 minutes," he said. Rebecca pointed toward Darius. "He is refusing his assigned seat." Olivia looked down at her tablet. "His original assignment is still listed as 1A in the boarding scan." Rebecca turned sharply. "The cabin list has been updated." "But there is no passenger acknowledgement," Olivia said. Kyle gave her a warning look. "You are not responsible for seating decisions." Darius watched the hierarchy close around the truth. Thomas held out his hand for the boarding pass, studied it briefly, then looked toward Rebecca instead of checking the system himself. "Were you instructed to move?" he asked. "I was told my valid reservation no longer mattered," Darius replied. Thomas exhaled. "That is not what I asked. It is the answer that matters." The captain's expression hardened. "We cannot delay an entire flight over one seat." Darius looked across the first-class cabin. Every premium seat was occupied except the one being disputed, and the man sitting in it had no visible boarding pass. "Then do not delay it," Darius said. "Restore the confirmed passenger and ask the unauthorized occupant to move." Henry stood halfway from the seat. "Unauthorized." Rebecca placed a reassuring hand near his shoulder without touching him. "You are exactly where you are supposed to be, Mr. Whitman." Darius heard the certainty in her voice. She had chosen the customer whose suit matched her idea of importance. Olivia opened the cabin record again. A new status appeared beside Darius's name, pending verification. Her eyes widened. The change had been entered less than 1 minute earlier under Rebecca Sloan's employee credentials. Olivia looked up. Rebecca was already watching her. 26 minutes remained. 25 minutes remained. Olivia kept her eyes on the tablet, but her fingers moved quickly. Before Rebecca could close the updated record, Olivia saved a copy of the original boarding scan and the new verification status to the secure crew archive. The action took less than 3 seconds. It felt much longer. Rebecca stepped toward her. "Give me the tablet." Olivia looked up. Why was his status changed after he boarded? The first-class cabin grew quieter. Rachel Kim shifted in her seat and raised her phone, not to record, but to check the boarding time displayed in the airline application. Darius remained beside 1A, still holding the pass everyone had chosen not to trust. Rebecca extended her hand. This is an internal matter. Olivia did not surrender the device. The original record shows a confirmed seat. The change was entered after Mr. Coleman entered the cabin. Kyle moved beside Rebecca. You are a junior crew member. Stop questioning decisions above your position. Olivia's grip tightened. I am reading the system. Thomas Grant looked toward the cockpit clock, then toward the open cabin door. We are losing our departure window. Darius turned to him. You are losing time because your crew altered a valid reservation. Thomas ignored the distinction. Mr. Coleman, I am offering you one final opportunity to take the alternate seat. Rachel spoke before Darius could answer. That is not an alternate seat. It is a downgrade. Every face turned toward her. She held up her own boarding pass. I was standing behind him at the gate. His pass scanned green, and the screen showed 1A. Rebecca's expression sharpened. Ma'am, please remain out of a crew matter. Rachel looked toward Henry. Was his pass scanned? Henry adjusted his jacket and stared toward the window. Kyle answered for him. Mr. Whitman is a priority customer. That was not my question, Rachel said. The words landed cleanly. Darius watched Rebecca search for control, but the story she had created was beginning to develop witnesses. Olivia opened the change history. The seat was moved at 9:13 this morning. The employee identification belongs to Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca's voice dropped. Close that screen immediately. Why? Olivia asked. Because you are violating procedure. Olivia looked at the record, then at Darius. The procedure says seat changes require passenger consent or an operational reason. Neither one is listed. Kyle leaned closer and spoke quietly enough that only the nearby rows could hear. Think carefully about whether you want to keep this job. Olivia's face tightened, but she did not lower the tablet. Darius looked directly at Kyle. You just threatened an employee for preserving an accurate record. Kyle straightened. I reminded her of the chain of command. A chain of command does not turn a false record into the truth, Darius replied. Rachel activated her phone camera and held it at chest level. Rebecca noticed. Recording crew members is prohibited. Documenting what happens in a public cabin is not the reason this flight is delayed, Rachel said. Henry finally stood from 1A, but only to face Darius. How much will it take for you to let this go? Darius studied him for a long second. You still think this is about the price of a seat? He looked around the cabin, where several passengers were now watching openly. It is about what they were willing to change because they believed no one important would question it. Olivia saved the audit log to a second secure location. Rebecca saw the confirmation appear and understood the record could no longer be quietly erased. 23 minutes remained. 22 minutes remained. Rebecca's composure had begun to fracture, but she covered it with the language of procedure. This passenger is escalating the situation, she said, turning toward Thomas as though repetition could make the accusation true. Darius had not raised his voice. He had not blocked the aisle. He had not touched anyone. He was standing beside the seat printed on his boarding pass while the crew treated his refusal to accept a false record as misconduct. Thomas looked toward Kyle. Call airport security. Olivia stared at him. For what reason? Noncompliance, Thomas said. Rachel lowered her phone just enough to speak clearly. He has complied with every request except giving up a seat he paid for. Rebecca stepped toward the cabin intercom. Passengers, we apologize for the delay. We are managing an individual who is refusing crew instructions. The announcement moved through the aircraft like a verdict delivered before a hearing. Conversations stopped beyond the first-class curtain. Faces turned toward the front. Darius looked down at his boarding pass, then at the people now watching him through a story Rebecca had manufactured. For one brief moment, the cabin faded, replaced by another airport 25 years earlier. He had been 22, standing beside his father at a crowded gate in Detroit. His father held a valid lounge invitation from a client, but an employee had studied his work jacket and told him the invitation must belong to someone else. The card had been real. The name had matched. None of it mattered until the white executive who invited him arrived and confirmed what his documents had already proven. On the drive home, his father had said, "Some people do not need more evidence. They need a reason to stop believing the worst." Darius had carried that sentence into every boardroom he entered. Now, standing inside an airline he had helped rescue, He heard the same doubt, wearing a different uniform. Two airport security officers appeared at the aircraft door. Officer Daniel Ruiz entered first, calm and observant, while another officer remained near the jet bridge. Rebecca approached them immediately. This man refuses his assigned seat and has become disruptive. Daniel looked at Darius. Sir, may I see your boarding pass and identification? Darius handed both over without hesitation. Daniel compared the name, photograph, and seat number. This says 1A. Rebecca answered quickly. The seat was reassigned. Daniel looked toward Olivia. Was the passenger notified before boarding? Olivia shook her head. No. His pass scanned as confirmed, and the status changed afterward. Rebecca's voice hardened. She does not have authority to interpret the record. I do not need authority to read a timestamp, Olivia replied. Kyle stepped forward. Officer, we need him removed so the aircraft can depart. Daniel did not move. Has he threatened anyone? No one answered. Has he interfered with safety equipment? Silence. Has he refused to show identification? Rebecca glanced toward Thomas. The case they had built sounded smaller when reduced to facts. Darius looked at Daniel. They are not protecting the flight. They are protecting an assumption. Rachel's camera remained steady. Several passengers beyond the curtain began murmuring in agreement. Thomas checked the time and made one final attempt to control the room. We cannot keep debating this. Darius took out his phone. Then we will stop debating and start verifying. He selected Monica Hayes' number. 20 minutes remain. 20 minutes remained. Monica Hayes answered on the first ring. Good morning, Mr. Coleman. Darius kept his eyes on Rebecca. Monica, begin executive verification. Preserve the original seat record, pull the audit history, notify operations, and suspend departure authorization until the discrepancy is resolved. Her response was immediate. Understood. I am opening the passenger record now. Rebecca gave a short laugh, but it lacked the confidence she had carried minutes earlier. Anyone can pretend to call an assistant. Darius lowered the phone slightly. Then let the system answer for me. Olivia's tablet chimed. A secure notification appeared across the screen. Executive review initiated. She looked at Thomas. The flight record is locked. Thomas stepped closer. Locked by whom? Monica's voice came through Darius's speaker. By corporate operations under authority code Coleman 7. The name reached Thomas before the meaning did. His expression changed only slightly, but Darius saw it. Kyle saw it too. Rebecca refused to. That could be fabricated, she said. Officer Daniel Ruiz looked toward the cockpit. Captain, can you confirm whether dispatch authorization is active? Thomas disappeared through the cockpit door. A few seconds later, a warning tone sounded from the flight management display. He returned with less color in his face. The flight release has been suspended. Henry Whitman stood beside 1A now, no longer relaxed. What exactly is happening? Darius looked at him. The record is being restored. Monica continued. The original reservation confirms seat 1A under Darius Coleman. The change was entered at 9:13 this morning by Rebecca Sloan. There is no passenger consent, no operational justification, and no supervisor authorization. Rachel's camera remained steady. Several passengers beyond the curtain leaned forward to hear. Rebecca stepped toward Olivia. Turn that off. Olivia did not move. It is a corporate review. You are still under my supervision, Rebecca said. Darius answered before Olivia could. Not for much longer if the record confirms what we already know. Kyle moved toward the galley, but Officer Ruiz raised one hand. No one alters or removes any device until this review is complete. The command changed the balance inside the cabin. For the first time, the crew was being asked to preserve evidence instead of control the narrative. Monica spoke again. I have also located 6 prior complaints involving Ms. Sloan. 3 concern unauthorized seat changes. 2 describe discriminatory language. 1 alleges retaliation against a junior employee who challenged a passenger removal. Olivia's face tightened. Rebecca looked toward Thomas. Those complaints were closed. Closed is not the same as disproven, Darius said. Thomas returned his attention to the clock. We are now outside our departure window. Then the schedule will finally reflect the cost of ignoring the truth, Darius replied. Henry reached for his briefcase. I want to speak with whoever is in charge. Darius met his eyes. You have been speaking to him. Silence settled across first class. Monica's voice remained calm. 15 minutes until the executive operations team joins the cabin feed. Rebecca stared at Darius, and for the first time she was no longer deciding whether he belonged. She was beginning to understand exactly who had been standing in front of her all along. 15 minutes remained. The first-class cabin screen flickered, then changed from the Meridian welcome display to the blue and silver seal of corporate operations. Evan Pierce appeared from the airline command center in Atlanta, seated beside legal counsel and the director of customer integrity. The passengers nearest the front turned fully in their seats. No one spoke. Evan looked into the camera with the controlled expression of a man who had already read enough to understand the seriousness of the moment. Mr. Coleman, the executive review is active. The original reservation has been restored, the audit history is preserved, and the board has been notified. Rebecca's face tightened. Thomas stood near the cockpit door, his hands still, his attention fixed on the screen. Kyle remained beside the galley, no longer smiling. Henry Whitman looked from Evan to Darius, as if searching for some smaller explanation. Darius did not move toward seat 1A. He stayed in the aisle, exactly where Rebecca had tried to reduce him to a problem. Evan continued. For the record, Darius Coleman is the controlling shareholder of Meridian Airlines, chairman of the Strategic Oversight Committee, and the principal investor responsible for the company's restructuring 4 years ago. The words traveled beyond first class. Murmurs rose behind the curtain. Rachel lowered her camera slightly, not because the moment mattered less, but because the truth no longer needed her to carry it alone. Rebecca stepped forward. Mr. Pierce, this was a seating misunderstanding. Darius turned toward her. A misunderstanding is corrected when the facts appear. He pointed toward Olivia's tablet. You saw the confirmed scan. You changed the status. You ignored a witness. You threatened the employee who preserved the record. Then you called security because I refused to accept your version of the truth. Rebecca opened her mouth, but Evan spoke first. The audit confirms every change came from your credentials. Henry straightened his jacket. I was told the seat had been approved. Evan looked toward him. Your communications show that you requested a front cabin upgrade as part of the pending corporate contract. Henry's expression changed. That was a business accommodation. Darius faced him. You were given my seat because they trusted your suit more than my boarding pass. The cabin went silent again. Darius turned back to Rebecca. You did not deny a wealthy man a seat. You denied a black passenger dignity because you believed he had no power. Thomas lowered his eyes. Kyle looked toward the exit. Olivia stood beside the galley with the tablet, still held firmly in both hands. Darius looked at her. Display the original record and the change history. Olivia connected the device to the cabin screen. The first image showed Darius Coleman, seat 1A, confirmed at 8:47 in the morning. The second showed the status change at 9:13 under Rebecca Sloan. The third showed Henry Whitman moved into 1A without passenger consent or supervisor approval. Each timestamp appeared in clear white letters. No argument could survive the sequence. Rebecca's voice weakened. I made a judgment call. Darius looked at her steadily. No. You made a judgment about me. Evan waited on the screen. Mr. Coleman, corporate authority is ready for your direction. Darius glanced at the silver watch on his wrist. 10 minutes remained. Preserve every record, he said. No one leaves this aircraft until accountability reaches the people who made the choice, approved the choice, and protected the choice. 10 minutes remained. Evan Pierce brought the accountability report onto the cabin screen, but he did not display private personnel files. He read only the verified findings, each one tied to a timestamp, an employee identification number, and a recorded action. Rebecca Sloan had changed Darius's seat status after boarding. Kyle Mercer had approved the false reassignment and warned Olivia against preserving the record. Thomas Grant had accepted Rebecca's version without reviewing the scan, then requested security removal despite the absence of any safety threat. The facts arrived one by one, stripped of excuses. Rebecca looked toward Thomas. You told me to resolve the seating problem before departure. Thomas stared back at her. I did not tell you to alter the record. Kyle stepped away from the galley. I only followed the lead attendant. Olivia's expression changed as each person reached for distance from the choices they had made together. Darius watched without satisfaction. Accountability was not entertainment to him. It was the moment when responsibility stopped moving and finally found the people who owned it. Henry Whitman lifted his briefcase from beneath the seat. My company should not be involved in an internal staffing matter. Evan responded from the screen. Your messages requested preferential treatment in exchange for accelerating contract negotiations. Henry's face tightened. That was not a condition. Darius looked at him. You knew another passenger had a confirmed seat, and you remained there while the crew treated him as the problem. Rachel Kim kept her camera steady. Passengers beyond the curtain were now standing in the aisle, watching in silence. Officer Daniel Ruiz remained near the aircraft door, no longer there to remove Darius, but to ensure the process stayed orderly. Evan turned to Darius. The evidence supports immediate termination for Rebecca Sloan and Kyle Mercer. Captain Grant's participation also meets the threshold for termination under command responsibility and falsification oversight. Thomas looked up sharply. I did not alter the manifest. You authorized action based on a record you refused to verify, Darius said. Then you used your rank to protect the false version after 2 witnesses challenged it. Thomas lowered his eyes. Darius allowed one final pause. Rebecca Sloan, Kyle Mercer, and Thomas Grant are terminated effective immediately. The sentence did not rise above the cabin. It did not need to. Rebecca's crew tablet returned to the login screen. Kyle's access badge changed to inactive. Thomas's flight credentials disappeared from the operational display. The reaction moved through the aircraft in a wave of stunned silence. Rebecca stepped forward. You are firing the entire senior crew in front of these passengers. Darius met her eyes. You made the decision in front of these passengers. The accountability belongs in the same room. He turned toward Evan. Remove Henry Whitman's priority status and suspend all contract discussions with his company pending ethics review. Evan confirmed the action. Henry looked toward 1A, then toward the watching passengers. The seat that had seemed worth taking now looked impossibly small. Darius faced Olivia. Your position is protected. The record shows that you challenged the instruction, preserved the original data, and told the truth when it could have cost you your job. Olivia exhaled slowly. Rachel lowered her phone at last. Officer Ruiz opened the aircraft door fully. Rebecca, Kyle, Thomas, and Henry gathered their belongings under the eyes of the same people they had expected to ignore the injustice. As they walked toward the jet bridge, no one applauded. The silence was stronger than celebration. Darius looked at his watch. 30 minutes had passed since his first warning. Seat 1A was empty again, but he did not sit down. Now, he said, we decide what kind of airline deserves to leave this gate. The aircraft remained at the gate while the cabin settled into a silence no announcement could soften. Seat 1A stood empty beneath the reading light, its cream leather untouched, but Darius did not move toward it. He looked past the first-class curtain at the passengers who had watched the truth unfold in real time. Some held their phones at their sides. Others simply watched him, waiting to see whether power would become revenge or responsibility. Darius turned toward Evan Pierce on the cabin screen. This flight will not depart with a replacement crew until every passenger is briefed and every safety responsibility is reassigned properly. Evan nodded. A reserve team can be here within 45 minutes. Bring them, Darius said, and bring customer integrity, flight operations, and human resources into the review. Olivia remained near the galley, still holding the tablet that had preserved the original record. Officer Daniel Ruiz stood by the open aircraft door, calm and alert. Rachel Kim sat across the aisle, her phone finally lowered. Darius faced the cabin. What happened here was not a seating error, he said. A seat number can be corrected in seconds. This took longer because people chose an assumption over evidence. No one interrupted him. First class is a service category. Dignity is not. It does not belong to the person with the most expensive suit, the highest status, or the strongest connection. It belongs to everyone before they ever show a ticket. Rachel looked toward the passengers behind her. Several nodded. Darius continued. No employee will be allowed to describe a passenger as a security concern without naming a specific action. No seat assignment will be changed without a permanent audit trail, documented cause, and passenger notification. Any crew member who challenges discriminatory treatment will be protected from retaliation. Every complaint involving race, appearance, accent, or perceived status will be reviewed outside the local chain of command. Olivia's eyes filled with relief, but she remained steady. Darius looked at her. You spoke before you knew whether anyone powerful would stand beside you. She lowered the tablet slightly. I almost stayed quiet. Most courage begins with almost, Darius said. What matters is what you chose next. Evan confirmed that the new directives would be entered into emergency policy before the aircraft left the gate. Darius then turned toward Officer Ruiz. Thank you for asking for facts before taking action. Daniel gave a small nod. That should be normal. It should, Darius replied. That is why today matters. The reserve crew arrived less than an hour later, but Darius still did not claim 1A. He asked that Olivia be seated there during the operational review so she could explain exactly how the original record had been preserved. She hesitated, then accepted. The gesture was not a reward for recognizing a powerful man. It was recognition of someone who had protected the truth when rank told her not to. Darius remained standing in the aisle as the final passengers returned to their seats. He looked once more at the empty space where Rebecca had tried to decide who belonged. I never needed this seat to prove who I was, he said. I needed the truth to show who they had become. Outside the window, ground crews prepared the aircraft for a new departure. Inside, the airline had already begun moving in a different direction.